Again, welcome everyone joining us on the online summit and to actually the overall MUN Summit 2025. It's a pleasure to have you here and to know that you're a well supporter of Models of the United Nations everywhere. Today's panel is Making Online Shine. We're going to discuss about how online MUNs are thriving. And I'm your host, Lojain, and joining me on the stage are two very special guests in the MUN world. First of all, we have Jonas Bruns. He is someone who has transformed the Model United Nations experience through technology, and he is the CEO of MyMUN, and he has basically made it easier for students worldwide to connect and participate in MUN conferences. He also has a background in engineering and strategy consulting, and he is very passionate about making diplomacy more accessible for everyone. Jonas, welcome.
Thanks, Lojain.
Would you like to share any opening remarks with the participants?
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here as this is, I think, the third or fourth time I'm with the MUN Summit, and seeing how it's a format where people come together to debate MUN and somehow centralize, bring together that cluttered community is a big passion of mine, especially because this element of bringing people together is the core of what we do with MyMUN. I was in your shoes organizing a Model UN conference many years ago, and I just felt, as an engineer with that engineering lens on, hey, we could organize conferences so much easier, make them so much more accessible. And so now working in strategy consulting, I believe, like, hey, come on, a world where every student does one MUN in their student life, that's a world worth coding through the night for. And so with MyMUN, that's exactly what we aim for.
And thank
with
you for
people as fantastic as Lojain, as you, and Jaewon, and many others. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your efforts, all your efforts, and the team at MyMUN for making it MUN basically really accessible through our online platforms. And our second speaker for this panel is Jaewon Choi. He is a dedicated youth advocate and executive director at DMUN Foundation. It is the world's largest youth-led organization focused on stakeholder engagement within the UN system. His work centers on empowering young people to actively participate in political processes and advocacy efforts globally. Jaewon, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yep. Thank you. I actually did pre-wrote an opening statement, and now I realize it probably sounds a bit too formal and a bit too long, but let's see if I can get through it. So, yeah, good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining this session, and it's just my distinct pleasure to connect with Jonas here, to reconnect with Jonas here, actually. I'm very grateful to him today, as it was him who referred me to Philippe, who nominated me as the speaker for this session and the closing session. And thank you very much to, if I'm pronouncing that right, Lojain? I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, for moderating this session. I mean, it's a pleasure to work with her today. Just to introduce myself for people who don't know my organization or myself, I am the executive director of the DMUN Foundation. We are an international NGO that provides capacity building and educational programs to young people in international diplomacy. And we also, for Virtual Model UN, we actually operate the world's largest Virtual Model UN conference right now with a number of delegate registrations. And so I just want to say that I have a deep fondness towards virtual Model UNs. I mean, in fact, it was online Model UNs that started my Model UN career during COVID-19, and it provided me that inspiration to create the DMUN Foundation. So, a great pleasure to be here. Let's see how it goes.
Great. And just without any further ado, I will spark the question that for the sole reason of why we're here, we're talking about online MUNs. And I just was very curious to know, online MUNs, when did it actually start? When has it become a trend? Has it existed before COVID? And how is the trend flowing in the recent years? Anyone wants to take on that?
Well, I think I can speak more on the future aspect of things, and currently pre-COVID, I'm not a bit away on that. And I think Jonas would give me a better answer on that. But to answer your question on how online Model UN is doing right now and its future expectations, it's pretty evident that online MUNs have been experiencing a rate of steady decline across the past few years. We colloquially, at least in my foundation, calls it the post-COVID era demise. This our foundation's conference is actually one of the few remaining original virtual Model UN conferences that was made in 2021 to still exist. And so people did ask to me why we still have this program when our registrations and attendance rates are going down. I think the reason is really simple, because there are still a lot of young people who need virtual Model UN to attend Model UN conferences.
And
Now here
Jonas,
comes the dinosaur. Now here comes the dinosaur speaking about pre-COVID times, right?
I mean, it was pretty recent. It was like 2019, so it's not. I wouldn't really call it as a dinosaur to say.
But yeah, I mean, let's do some archaeology here, yeah, to stay in the metaphor. We actually looked into it from a MyMUN perspective, and funny enough, the feature to claim a conference is online was only added to MyMUN, I think, in May of 2020. So I think it shows two things. On the one hand, it shows how it only really became significant, at least significant enough for it to be a feature during the pandemic. Yeah. And the other thing is that it doesn't really show if it was there before or not. Yeah. But if anything, then it was definitely a niche phenomenon, and it was a weird, funky idea. I mean, yes, we may have had Skype before, but who was really before the pandemic in a video conference like we're having this right now? I remember, I mean, we all might remember the first times we were like on video calls, and it still felt a bit weird with the camera, and now I can see myself. And so this is kind of I think part of the cultural change in society more broadly that has gotten us to normalize, coming together as we do in this very moment for people across continents to meet and discuss. And so that's why online MUN kind of had an interesting trajectory. Actually, I looked into the data today about how many online MUN conferences are there on MyMUN year after year. Not sure I can, I can share my screen here because I visualized that a little bit. Not sure that helps, but I was very surprised because Jaewon, the data seems to actually contradict what you said and what I always believed. That MUNs, online MUNs are going down, but I mean, let's take it with some precaution. Yeah, I mean, MyMUN as a platform is growing tremendously, and so that also underpins how that curve might go up. The other analysis that I'm really curious to do now that I see this is actually to look not only at the number of conferences but also at the number of participants, because what we see kind of anecdotally, and this very much reflects what Jaewon was saying, is how there's a strong consolidation where, yes, we see there is a lot more conferences in 2024 than in 2021, but my hypothesis, and I haven't looked into the data to that degree, is that there is a few big conferences with, in my eyes, DMUN clearly kind of spearheading that, kind of professionalizing the MUN, the online MUN sphere, and really kind of not only professionalizing it, but also growing it, really owning it and developing it further. And then there's a long tail of many conferences kind of that spark up by people that are just passionate about MUN. No?
This is definitely a very unique set of data, and I actually, what you did mention, that taking into consideration the number of participants who have joined the conferences would definitely make us understand more how the future of online MUNs will roll from here. It's like, so to say, we have 30 online conferences, but the size of them are nothing in comparison to the traditional ones. So what will that mean in the future? But I actually do want to ask another question. Is, why do we think that there are people who would choose traditional MUNs rather than online MUNs? So just to get us there, what are the actually basic differences between both MUNs in terms of, like, from organizing the MUN, from having participants, and from engaging them into these topics that we'll be discussing in the conferences. Jonas, would you like to start on that front?
Oh, I'm scared to start because I know I have an expert on this in this call. Yeah? Let me still, I think, pick a few points, and Jaewon will tell me where I'm wrong. Yeah? But I think the core difference, at least to me, is always that accessibility element. Yeah? I mean, and we see that with the MUN Summit now, where the amount of participants that we're able to reach online is just so much bigger than the amount of people we can get into a room physically in New York. Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, we're living in a world of climate crisis. Does it really make sense that we're all flying for hours on end to meet for a Model UN? No, I think this is a fair question. If we really want every student to do one MUN, yeah, can we get there without having people engage online? Think about all the cost that there is attributed to flights. Think about the visa troubles that many folks around the world would have to travel internationally. So from my perspective, this is not an either or comparison, but really, and DMUN does this in a stellar way in my eyes, where you kind of have online conference as like a very accessible way into the MUN community, and that then transforms. And Jaewon, please tell it to the world, where you take the best of those delegates and send them around the world to participate in actual UN debates. And I think this is really stellar, and this is also why I was very excited when I saw Jaewon was on this panel with me.
Well, I will continue on what Jonas just said. I think Jonas did capture that, quite accurately. Like, I don't have many points to disagree about. I think most of them are very accurate. I want to talk about the perspective of the organizers, because I think organizing an in-person versus a virtual Model UN conference is very different. First of all, there's the element of cost. In-person conferences are very costly, and that limits the amount of entities and individuals who can host conferences like this. I mean, traditional leaders of MUN conferences are, colleges, high schools, or MUN specific organizations like NMUN, which have existed for almost a century now. So the process of organizing a conference is quite different. While online is way flexible and requires a lower operating budget, it also means that the expectations of delegates for these conferences are very different. Like in person, you'd expect to have generally a more high quality experience. But because the range of online MUN conferences are so large, there's no standardized unit of measurement of, is this a good online Model UN conference? I have worked in so many online MUN conferences that have questionable practices, questionable budgets and such, and saw conferences like miserably fail, having like 10 delegates actually attend. And so there is, I think, generally a worse reputation of online MUNs in the MUN circuit, which affects our ability to get delegates and do marketing. And I think the final difference is just what the delegate experiences. I think for an in-person conference, there is that joy, there is that unique aspect of being able to connect from face to face. Like, even after the conference technically ends, you might want to hang out with someone that you have just met, or talk about it, or prepare for your next draft resolution that you're going to submit. There is that beauty in there. While we do try to replicate it, let's say by having delegates, individually make their own Zoom calls after a conference to discuss and connect, there is definitely a limit on how much we can achieve. But I think this is a fair trade, right? We get more accessibility, we get more people to experience, maybe not the full MUN experience, but its key fundamental aspects. And in exchange, we lose out on some of those details. But I think that is a trade-off that makes sense and is still makes online MUNs very worthwhile to host and to participate in.
Definitely. Even though, like you said, I actually did not know coming here to expect that there is a bad rep about online MUNs, because I personally started during the COVID pandemic, and I sometimes really miss the online times because, as you said, it's not really accessible for everyone to travel whether it being financially or other restrictions. So yeah, I really sometimes do consider online MUNs as a sometimes very alternative for me personally. But to actually take on some point that you mentioned, when you said that there's a huge difference between why people would choose the traditional one, and part of it is also the authenticity that we can see in the bureaucratic processes that traditional MUNs are known for. So, how do you think online MUNs have tried, uh, from at least from the successful ones that you have witnessed, how do you think they have maintained that level of authenticity and high expectancy that we can see in a traditional MUN?
Would uh, would would you like to go first, Jonas, or I can also start if you
I
like?
think this one's for you, Jaewon. You're the one preserving the authenticity there.
Sure. I think this, I would say, is not a general example. DMUN is very unique on how we build authenticity and that unique, let's say, selling point of our online MUNs. We actually have a program starting from about 2024 where we build a linear pathway of participants who participate in our MUN to actually receive opportunities to represent DMUN in international bodies across the world. I mean, specifically, our foundation as an NGO, we have observer or consultative status at over 27 intergovernmental bodies, both in the UN system and other IGOs. And we nominate close to about 128 young people every year to participate in over 82 conferences and forums. That was our data in 2024, which is remarkable. Because if you think about it as an online MUN participant, or even a general MUN participant, that opportunity to engage with the UN, to address delegates there, to direct lobbying is a very special opportunity. And I think that's one of the key selling factors that still keeps us, let's say, relevant. That keeps our foundation still relevant at this the apocalypse of online MUNs, I would say.
But also, I mean, Jaewon, what you mentioned first, I think is very important. This is unique about a demon in a way that you're really kind of thinking at it from a strategic level, and you're really kind of thinking this path through from the moment people find out about online MUNs existing until long after the conference, and this path is very cool. And actually, what just crossed my mind also, yeah, and we should definitely move this conversation there beyond the MUN summit also, is to think about how we can use and leverage this huge community of people that are suddenly infected with the MUN virus, yeah, around the world, and make MUNs more accessible by having these people host conferences in their local communities, yeah, because when I think about, especially in the US, where Model UN is very much like a high school driven thing, and there's this MUN club that goes to a place, and then there's a teacher. Year after year, the teacher generates, a class of 20 folks that go to a conference. Can't we get those, online MUN community, which is, in my eyes, a lot less delegation focused and a lot more individual delegates? If there's one odd one out, there's one kid from the suburbs somewhere, can't we get these folks to say to their teachers, you won't believe what I did on the weekend, and pitch that idea to the teachers, get the teachers on board to support them, and all of a sudden, out of that one art student who was participating in DMUN, yeah, we're suddenly generating maybe a class of 20, or even if it's 8 only, from that teacher who suddenly gets the MUN virus. And so this is really, I think, where we can and should see it not as kind of two separate worlds, but really think about how we can integrate online and in person, so that it kind of really brings in the best of two worlds: the accessibility and this tremendous internationality that I think is unmatched, together with very personal connections and relationships that we built at MUN conferences.
That's definitely one of the perks of having online conferences, is that it really helped make MUN reach further places than a traditional conference would. And speaking more about the benefits of online conferences, Jonas, I would like to know if have the traditional MUNs in any way or form, have they adapted some of the processes that were introduced in the time of the online MUNs? Have they adapted them into more of the traditional MUNs?
I was thinking about that for some time. I would luckily say that the one thing that I think is most obvious that happened is that people started using the software that we built during the pandemic, and there's more openness to software and questioning how can we make debates more efficient, can we debate better, yeah. Because what we observe is that the organizers of an MUN conference typically do that once. There's very few people that are as crazy as Jaewon. Typically, people do it once in their life. And when they do it, it's the biggest thing that they've ever done in their life. We have to acknowledge this. And what this means is that they will cling on to everything they can to make this biggest project of their life a success. So what do? They are incentivized to take very little risk, innovate no more than they really need to, and only change the things that really didn't work last year. Everything else they're just going to take over from the year before because it worked. Yeah. And they don't want to be the ones that break these decades of legacy. And so if we think about this, it means that many students really kind of replicate year after year what was done before, and there's very little kind of zooming out, thinking, hey, where do we want the MUN Summit to develop into in 10 years' time? Yeah? That was different during the pandemic. That, I think, for the first time, at least as long as I can remember, there was an opening where people actually thought about, hold on, we're now having our conference online, so maybe we need different tools, maybe we need different processes. And this was a very short window of opportunity, maybe 2020 to like end of 2022, I would say, at max. At max. And in this short window, people started to actually look and Google, hey, which MUN software is out there? All these American MUN students that, in grade 11 tell me I'm an old-fashioned man and I love pen and paper, all of a sudden start to use MUN command. And suddenly they have transparency on how long people are speaking. They have transparency on who spoke how much, and so on and so forth. And so this is fantastic to see. I mean, it's fantastic to see that people do that now, also coming back. We had to do some convincing work kind of when the pandemic faded down. People were like, okay, now we can go back to as we did before, because MUN command, that's this online MUN tool. No, I mean, that worked perfect. And I think and hope that the community benefits from it tremendously. Yeah.
Well, it has definitely been very beneficial. And Jaewon, what do you see on there? Are those trends going to stay for a while, or?
I think it depends on the advancement of that trend, right? I think, at least let's talk about an example, right? Jonas's MUN command and other software that helps with the MUN proceedings. I think those would stay because there is tremendous benefit in using this both for online and in-person conferences. Like, it just reduces the burden that the chairs have. I mean, I'm between the generation that Jonas mentioned, pen and paper versus MUN command. My first MUN conference, they actually used PowerPoint, and my second conference, they used Excel to manage those things. So, digital, but not so advanced. But I think those advancements that actually provide significant value to both in-person and virtual MUNs, innovations that reduce the amount of effort, that reduces risk, that reduces, money or resources involved, those are here to stay. Because Model UN conferences, most of them, they don't have a high threshold of resources and budgets. They need to be efficient, and that's the same for our organization. They need to keep their operating budgets really low. And so if you have technologies that can sort of allow for that, those innovations, I think for 100% they would stay. However, if the innovations, other associated innovations that doesn't really provide that sort of value, I'm not necessarily certain if that would stay, because once again, Jonas is absolutely correct that these MUN organizers have a trajectory of just copy and pasting things that work. And if a new idea doesn't work out, they just copy and paste the older one, that actually worked. So I think the graph of the trajectory the rate of innovations will eventually decrease, well, at least stabilize, I would say.
I'd like to know more about like how, besides of softwares, are there any other ways where we can envision a future where both formats could complement each other without one being completely overshadowing and overtaking the other?
I have to, Jaewon, I have to tell you this. This was the coolest thing. I was in Paris, and it was like open day, open house day at the Ministry of Education. And so they had different startups that pitched their thing. And there was one company from Lyon which had like robots. And so their idea was that it's like for a child that breaks their leg and they can't participate in school for whatever 2 weeks, and the kid would normally miss out on school. And how can the student who just broke a leg participate and not fall behind in school? And so they developed these robots, which they say is very important, because if you just put a laptop, then you're not seen. But it's like a little robot that you can walk around, kind of like this Sheldon Cooper robot, with the claw, what's it called, the hanger and stuff, yeah. And so I thought that's genius, and I also thought, hey, come on, can't we like use a bunch of those, on the weekend, and just kind of get them from a school and integrate them in an MUN where we have online and in person kind of come together. I'm yet to make that happen, but I would really want to see that.
Right. If Jonas ever offered a trial version, I would certainly employ it, depending on budget, though. I think the trajectory of evolution, at least even in non-software aspects for MUNs, I think quite frankly mimics the real UN. Starting from 2020, what happened was all the UN proceedings either got canceled or switched completely online. And then after that, starting from 2021 to 2022, they had, they returned to office to some degrees, but they still had virtual participation available. And now the norm in major bodies of the UN, such as Human Rights Council, is to allow virtual interventions and statements. And so I think when the UN innovates to, let's say, adopt those technologies that Jonas mentioned, then Model UN will continue to do so. And so I think the most, I'd say, likely innovation that would be adopted as a mainstream element of Model UN would be hybrid conferences, because right now there isn't a lot of MUNs that offer hybrid conferences. I know Toronto Model United Nations, led by my good colleague Jacob Green, that's one, but there's not a lot of other conferences out there. But I think this is going to be very likely to be implemented, because you can capture the audience that comes to the in-person conferences, but even a wider audience that's available online. Like, you're just getting extra participants, and if you charge them, that's extra money. Like, I see that this could bring tremendous potential growth to these MUN conferences. And I think that's why I really look forward to see how that hybrid format would be interpreted by the respective MUNs.
Both examples are really interesting to capture like what is the kind of future that we're working towards. It's more of a future that's in between, that has not really lost its essence of traditionalism and keeping that heritage going on, while in the same time, hand in hand, adapting to different challenges that the world might present. Like, for example, when the pandemic happened, no one really expected the scale of how it would spread and how it would affect our daily lives. But then out of nowhere, online MUNs really emerged as a concept that I'm really happy to see that it's almost not going anywhere in the near future, but there is also room for it to adapt into something, as Jaewon really mentioned right now, a hybrid format that can be really kept for future people to engage and reach virtually other places that they physically can't. And that is just a very beautiful future to envision. And keeping on the topic of the future, I would like to know from both of you, what are the two most let's say one or more most exciting parts that you look for in MUNs in general, not even online MUNs? What do you see taking? What would you see the future shaping in towards, and how is there any particular examples or excitements that really trigger your imagination in that regard? And
I have
Jaewon, I
another
see the
cool
smile on your
technology
face.
thing. But you
Yes.
want, please?
Well, yeah. No, I will start the floor, I guess. I think, at least for me, the essence of joy that Model UN gives me is not. It's something that's very timeless. From the start of the Model UN, which Philip actually mentioned is earlier than the UN itself, the key part of MUN, I think, is the start. You know, when your opening ceremony with those speeches and when those delegates start getting into their seats, and it's very awkward. Nobody knows really each other except for a couple of people who they might actually have the connections to know. But then, as you see, as the chair proceeds, moves into general debate or the general speakers list, you start to see that sort of vibrancy among the delegates come out. Like people are willing to speak, people are willing to raise, points to object to other people's speech. Like that transformation, that metamorphosis from awkward inactivity to a closer bond among its participants. That I feel like just seeing that gives me joy, and it gives me that motivation to do the things that I currently do. I think that in itself is the essential purpose of Model UN, to bring people who have different thoughts and to connect them. Without those opportunities, they wouldn't have the opportunity to ever learn about each other. And those are the places where those lifelong friendships are born. I have many colleagues of mine, many friends of mine that I met at Model UN, and it would have been a tremendous nightmare if I never met them, because they have helped me so much in my career in Model UN and vice versa.
I think everyone can relate to that specific point of creating, like having friendships that really last for years, maybe through MUNs. It's not just networking and progressing further in career paths. It's also something that really benefits you personally. And Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that. I mean, look, I think the three of us were the perfect example. I mean, we've all met some time ago, yeah, and never, I think, met in person. But we met in person in Maastricht, I think, right?
Yes.
But on top of that, I mean, I just yesterday night, I'm here in Vienna. I was out for a night with friends, and many of which I know through MUN, and many more I met at the event I was at, which were fellow MUNers, and so that community is just amazing. What kind of one, let's call it, tech vision of where online MUN could evolve to is something we looked into also during the pandemic, when all of a sudden, you may remember, Apple had this HoloLens, or what was it called? Yeah. And at the time, everyone was speaking about physical, what was it called, virtual worlds and metaverse and whatnot. So we actually spoke with one, and it's like a company, they built virtual worlds, and we were speaking with them if there should be a more immersive virtual online MUN experience where they would kind of replicate the UN building, maybe even some embassies in New York. And so the accessibility to the UN headquarters is so limited because, I mean, people have to actually work there, and it's not just a fun place, a playground for Model UNs, right? But if we could have that as a virtual setting, that would make it so much more immersive. And if you actually kind of walked around in the metaverse like that, I think that would be the wildest thing. And you could have your online social at this one embassy and then replicate that. So I think there's really nothing that we cannot imagine where the future can take this and allow for these virtual experiences to be more immersive, to form even stronger bonds than we can today. And so I'm very, very excited to see where Jaewon and all the many other people from your team and the MUN community more broadly will take this. I'm happy to support whatever, but the metaverse, they might be a bit funky, yeah.
I would say it's not even funky or ambitious. It could be a reality. I mean, it's definitely a zone that's less discovered, but if really discovered, I mean, like it will really unlock endless possibilities for participants. Really, so just hearing you speak about it, I was like, why hasn't anyone thought about that? Really, so far, and no one has adopted ways to make that a reality because like virtual reality has been there for many years now, and it's something that could actually be a reality one day. And hopefully now I'm actually going to take that idea and sleep and think about it for maybe a month ahead. So well, thank you for sharing that. And we do have actually questions from the participants online here. One participant really asked an actionable question. Basic on he said, or they said, how can online MUNs maximize their benefit to reach those who can't join in-person conferences? And Jaewon, you did mention something about online MUNs being a demise to MUNs in general and having a really bad rep. And I would really like to hear your answer on how these online MUNs can really maximize their reach to for participants.
Right. I think the main sort of I think I'm first going to explain where we get most of our delegates. And actually, it has evolved over time. Like when we first started in 2021, we used Google Forms and we just hoped that somebody would notice it. And then we sort of evolved to more MUN centric or other use opportunity platforms like MyMUN. And I think those are where that outreach comes. Like for instance, if you search Model UN conference, MyMUN is actually one of the first search results that come out. And that's where any young person who has a stable internet connection who wants to learn about Model UN discovers, right? And so we actually made a new sort of a collaboration between MyMUN and the DMUN Foundation, which was we Jonas and his colleagues developed a custom page for us where we can list all of our different opportunities that's being hosted throughout the year. And so what happens is we have that link inserted to the front page. And so what happens is if somebody wants to attend an online conference and goes to MyMUN's front page and scroll down, they can see free online MUN programs. And that's how we mostly get our delegates now. And so if we want to expand accessibility of online MUNs, I think we need to provide more support, maybe at a governmental or other level, more funding and support to companies like MyMUN, those databases of multi-UN conferences that act as the first points of outreach for people who are interested in MUN and virtual MUN.
Yeah, and maybe adding onto this. I mean, of course, I always love when Jaewon says MyMUN should get more government funding. I think until now there has been exactly 0 pennies, but so we'll start with anything that we can get. No, but I mean the reality is that there is a long list of ideas that we would love to build to make MUNs even easier, even more accessible, to find them even better, and it's just a question of finding time to make this all happen. I mean, I could just imagine something where you can bookmark a conference, or you subscribe to DMUN, and every time DMUN lists a new conference, someone gets a message sent because I'm kind of following them on MyMUN. I would love to make all these things happen. It's as Jaewon also acknowledged, not always happening at the speed that we at MyMUN would want to. And so there is a lot more potential, I think, to reach our communities around the world. Another thing that we at MyMUN did beyond just the technical, which is something that we're very proud of, is really go into the schools, reach out to schools, and host teacher trainings. Because teachers are the multipliers. They're the ones that are going to stay when years and years and years of students kind of come and go. And so that's why we identify teachers as just the number one multiplier in that educational ecosystem. And I think we're having 2 teacher trainings coming up, one in Munich and one in Heidelberg, where we're going to sit down and train the trainers, teach the teachers about how to organize MUNs, how to find MUNs, how to run an MUN club, and which options there are, including online MUNs, of course. Great question, Winston, by the way. I love your questions, and I just figured out that there's a chat. Yeah. And I love how you're one of the ones doing online MUNs before the pandemic, before it was cool.
Well, definitely the point of using teachers or the education system towards spreading MUNs is a ground that not many organizations have really used. It's one of the resources that are out there and we should really utilize. Also, just to add up to your answers, is there are many resources available online, but away from the resources, I think everyone can agree here that MUN is a passion, and seeing that it's a passion, consistency is actually one of the things that drive it. So even if you have a small scale MUN online one, even if you start off with you and two of your friends, you just keep on holding on to that idea, keep on holding on to that passion. You really do not know where it would take you in the future, because really that's how MUN is. It's just a driving passion for most of us. Even like now, we all have our professional careers outside of MUN, but we are still 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because it is just a very strong passion for all of us. So moving on to the second question, it was directed to Jaewon. Winston was curious to know, how did DMUN as an online organization obtain such prestigious observers positions?
Well, I do appreciate the question. I think it's hard to have a generalized answer because observer status, there's so many different ways to get it, and it depends so much on the organization. Like, for instance, getting ECHO's or consultative status or a special accreditation for the Force International Conference of Finance for Development is very different. Like, so I think the main thing is, though, if I had to summarize some of the key factors that the member states and the secretariats look for when applying for those statuses is, a, can you actually have meaningful contributions to the business of those organizations, right? Consultative or observer statuses often gives these organizations the permission to not only observe, but to provide written or oral input to the proceedings of that body. And so does your organization have the capability to send representatives and to actually speak on those issues, contributing to the organization's objectives? I think is a key factor. Another factor I think we should consider is the work of the organization actually relevant? Like, if you're an organization who's applying for consultative status on the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and let's say you deal with gender equality, it's a bit far off. And so I think for specifically cases of model UN conferences, we're in a very strategic position to get those statuses because the UN itself is interested in involving more stakeholders. Model UN organizations represent those stakeholders. We're a collection of stakeholders. And if, because we discuss and simulate so many bodies and topics, we can generally get observer statuses at almost any intergovernmental organization because our topics that we cover, our programs that we do, somehow align. So I think getting observer status is just a mix of your organization's integrity, what you do, that relevance, but also somehow luck.
Luck definitely does really add up to a lot of one's success. And there was a question on the chat here for Jonas, because for the teachers program, I believe this is a teacher asking how they can get in touch or apply for these teacher training sessions. Are they available? Are they going to be larger scale in the future, maybe?
Let's make it happen. I mean, right now it's very, very regional. So it's like in Munich suburbia and Heidelberg suburbia. So Julie, if you or your teachers should be around or willing to make the trip, then absolutely let me know. It's not something that we do that scales yet, I will admit. But I would love to. So I mean, I'm just looking also in Jaewon's direction here. Hey, Jaewon, I mean, let's make this happen at scale online. I don't know. Can we get your community so fired up that they get their teachers in a Zoom call for a day, and we teach the teachers. let's make it happen. Um, and yeah, I mean, as said, Julia, if you concretely want your teachers to participate in one of those things, let's walk the talk. Let's connect. I think I put my LinkedIn somewhere in this platform. I don't know how that works, but otherwise, if you just look up Jonas Bruns on LinkedIn, you'll find me. Besides that, yeah, I mean, I'm very passionate about making those things not just accessible for students, but also for teachers. In fact, we were speaking with one organization from Panama called ASPADE. It's Asociación Panamá de Debat. I don't speak any Spanish. About doing a similar training there, which would be online, but that's still in the conceptualization.
Yeah, and seeing that we are approaching the end of the session, I just wanted to give you the floor, both of you, to freely deliver any final remarks you might have towards MUN, online MUNs, the future, the past, the present. Where do you see it? Anything that your mind really drifts off towards.
Well, I will, by saying, deliver my statement, which I think is we need to do the talk on the criticism that online MUNs receive, right? Some of the criticism that virtual model learning conferences receive, such as its level of professionalism or organization, academic integrity, ChatGPT, lack of engagement, and many others are really, they're valid. And I've seen, as I said, and worked in these places where they actually failed because they didn't have those integral practices in place. But I think my main point to the wider model learning community, especially the in-person community, is that these are outliers. They do not represent the entirety of the virtual model learning community. We have conferences like our conference, DMUN, which has that level of caliber, a very similar standard of quality as many in-person MUNs. There are great conferences, great virtual ones out there, organized in a very professional manner that sometimes outcompete several in-person conferences. And so while the two model UN communities has remained to be quite separate and distinct, I think this is the time where we need to seek that collaboration. And so I just want to conclude this intervention here by just saying this. While online model UN is just quite different from what many people imagine the traditional model UN to be, we still play a very, very important role on establishing and expanding the wider model UN community to new avenues across the world.
Thank you so much, John. And I really hope that and wish the best of luck to DMUN. And I see a very bright future with it being safe in your hands, really. And Jonas?
Look, I have a full-time job where I shouldn't have the energy to do something like MUN. But the energy that MUN gives me is just so much that I really believe in this world, in this vision of every student doing one MUN in their student life. And I'm saying that since I think now 4 years or something. And that was true 4 years ago. And it holds true more than it did 4 years ago now. We need every student to participate in one MUN in our student lives. It's not going to change the world straight away, but it's going to change the people that will change the world. And so to get there, online MUNs are front and center. People like Jaewon and all these other MUNiacs out there hosting conferences are the ones that we want to empower at MyMUN, so that Jaewon and all the others can do their job, can get the conferences to grow, to flourish, to be high quality. And so that's why I'm always very, very excited to connect and to learn more and find endeavors in ways that we can support you all.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see such great actors in the MUN. It just feels like it is really a world that I really wish that everyone could just really get a taste of. Like you just said, Jonas, it's at least one conference in your life. Like what you said really summarized the whole thing. It's it will not change the world really directly, but it will change you as a person, and that is guaranteed 100%. If you talk to any MUNer out there, they will say the same thing. And thank you both for really joining this panel and leading beautiful discussions. We have really taken note from some of the things, aspect that we really did not discover as a whole MUN community. And we at MUNers Across Borders, we will work towards helping and working with other organizations like your organizations to kind of put the light on these aspects. And we also all wish the best future outcome for MUNs everywhere. And really thanking MUN and DMUN for all their hard work in empowering MUNers everywhere. And thank you all participants who have joined us and asked their questions. And in case you are very curious to know about the future programs that MyMUN or DMUN are engaging in, or their future aspects, please just like Jaewon said, a very quick Google search, and you'll see that both these organizations will pop up in the first results. So I would encourage you to follow their news and just glue your eyes towards them, because they are really leading the innovations in the MUN world, if I can say so. And yes, thank you again so much for joining us in this panel.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
thanks,
very
Lojain,
much.
for hosting this. Thanks for having this. And let's go to the moon.
Let's go
To the
to
moon.
I
Take
still
care,
have that
bye-bye.
sticker on my laptop, actually.
There's new ones, Lojain. I'll bring you more.
Well, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Take care,
yes,
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
thank you. And we'll see you in the rest of this session's outline for today. I will be closing this one and see you in the other sessions.
Yep.
Bye.